They're ground-based missiles, but it is also true that the idea of a no-fly zone exists kind of only in the imagination.
아이고야.
야,
안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천해야 하는 동탄 왕코입니다. 자, 오늘은 3월 11일. 제가 방금 야간 근무를 하고 영어 학원도 다녀오고 지금 씻고 와서 10시가 넘었습니다. 10시가. 너무 피곤한데 오늘이라도 팔굽혀펴기랑 운동을 안 하면 몸이 많이 썩을 것 같아서 이렇게 영상 앞에 섰습니다. 앉아 있습니다. 여러분 운동하셔야 돼요, 여러분. 오늘을 위해서 운동하는 게 아니고 내일을 위해서 운동을 하셔야 됩니다, 여러분. 자, 여전히 러시아는 우크라이나를 공격을 하고 있고요. 이제 3월 16일이 러시아 채권 만료일이죠. 그 뒤에 어떻게 될지가 가장 관전 포인트입니다, 여러분. 그리고 저번 수요일, 오늘은 금요일이에요. 수요일 날 대통령 선거가 있었죠, 우리나라. 그리고 목요일 날 아침에 결과가 나왔습니다. 아, 진짜 우리나라는 정말 대단한 것 같아요. 대통령도 탄핵을 하고 정권도 이렇게 막 쉽게 바꾸는 게 진짜 시민들의 힘이 아주 유권자들의 파워가 아주 강하다는 걸 알 수가 있습니다. 뭐 정권이 바뀌어서 저는 뭐 특정 당을 지지하는 입장이지만 정권이 바뀜으로써 이 한쪽의 고인물들을 없앨 수 있다는 장점이 있어요, 여러분. 예. 본인이 지지하는 당이 뽑히지 않았다고 많이 실망하지 마십시오. 또 여기가 못하게 되면은 우리가 또 우리 유권자들의 힘으로 많이 바꿀 수 있기 때문에. 와, 근데 우리나라는 이렇게 유권자가 힘이 센데 왜 이렇게 부정부패가 심할까요? 부정부패를 저질러도 뽑아주니까 그런 거겠죠? 뭐 어쩔 수 없습니다. 계속 지속적으로 정치에 계속 관심을 갖고 부정부패를 최대한 없앨 수 있는 방향으로 가야 되는 게 우리나라의 1순위이지 않을까요? 자, 스트레칭하고 운동을 하도록 하겠습니다. 일단 스트레칭을 최대한 위주로 많이 하도록 하겠습니다. 역시 운동을 할 때 역시 CNN이죠.
is unfolding in front of our eyes here. This is one of the cells. Come on in here. We're flying over ISIS front lines. This is the only protection we have. Nerves are still very much on edge. Firefighters have been battling this blaze for weeks. What do you say to people who question climate change?
We need to do something now.
Ivan Watson, CNN.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Halagarani tonight.
I'm Ivan Watson at the Moldova-Ukraine border. This is CNN.
아,
I want to give you an update now on a story we brought you earlier this week. You may remember the sickening tragedy outside of Kyiv, documented by a New York Times photographer and journalist, both of whom joined us this week to share the story. A mother and her children, along with a fourth person, killed by a mortar blast Sunday while trying to escape to safety. We're about to show you that video. We warn you again, it is disturbing.
Що вчора було з дітьми кажеш?
Погано було. Дітей 200-х вивозили, мирне населення, маленькі.
Shit! Shit, shit, shit. Shit.
Левый, смотри по его!
Стоять! All right.
No, no, no. Now we've isolated this frame from the video. You see that man there is a Ukrainian volunteer, Alexander is his name, trying to shepherd a family to safety, but who was also hit by the blast. Now there was some confusion afterwards about whether or not he was alive. New York Times photographer Lindsay Dario wanted to know, in part because 10 minutes before that attack, he had used his own body to cover her from the shelling. I have to report that the two were reunited. Lindsay posted this to her Instagram account. You see three photos there. On the left, Alexander, again, protecting Lindsay minutes before the attack, literally covering her with his body. At the top right, just moments before the attack, in that last photo, is the reunion. Lindsay says he's got some shrapnel in his leg, stones in his back, and that the doctor said in 1 month he'll be in good condition. We hope for a speedy recovery. As you can tell, Ukrainians are not backing off this fight. Far from it. Some Russian soldiers just miles from Kyiv are being met with serious resistance. Latest developments from Ukraine and that next.
Oh.
学童の子供たちは僕をパラアスリートとしてではなくただの足が速い人間だと思ってる。足がないことでいろいろな困難に遭ってきたと思われることが多いけど、そう思ったことは一度もない。競技用義足は僕に無限の可能性をくれた。走り幅跳びでは義足のパラアスリートが世界記録を更新した。スポーツの新たな可能性を見出した。自分の限界を試す場だった陸上が東京パラリンピックという大きな夢になった。これから人間はどう進化しどう走っていくのか、常識を塗り替えていこう。
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smirconish, Saturday on CNN.
People are so exhausted. I'm just gonna help her carry this bag a second.
CNN is on the front lines.
Another rocket landed up the street here.
Following the facts.
Conditions are getting more desperate by the day.
Witnessing the moments.
We're seeing refugees flood in.
This is really a way station for families.
Lights are being shut
We are witnessing a remarkable strength.
on the Ukraine-Moldova border.
Poland.
Kyiv.
And this is CNN.
I'm Robin Curnow in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
Russian forces are growing closer to Kyiv, as near as 9 miles in one area, and new satellite images show that their massive convoy north of the city, which has been stalled now for weeks, is off the road and dispersed, finding positions of advantage and concealment in nearby towns and rural areas. You can see tire tracks and vehicles in this small town. Now, according to the company that produces these images, they show that some elements, most notably towed artillery, are taking cover in the sparse patches of trees near Lubyanka, which is about 3 miles northwest of the airbase in Hostomel, which is a critical airbase. Now, again, you can see all the tire tracks in the field in the upper left portion of the frame there. 10 miles west of the base, a number of fuel trucks and what the satellite image provider Maxar says appears to be multiple rocket launchers are seen in a field near a wooded area just off the road. Retired four-star General David Petraeus was on the program in our last hour and said they're now doing, those Russian forces, what any well-trained forces would have done from the outset, namely disperse and find cover as opposed to be bunched up on a road altogether. He also weighed in on a Russian tank column outside Kyiv that failed to do exactly that, had tanks bunched up all together and paid the price, being wiped out in an ambush. Ukraine's military provided the video. We've provided the translation in Russian on screen. Watch.
Шестой полк почти потерял. Что? Шестой полк пока не пока собираю. Очень много потерь. Ждали. Голова колонны. Попала в засаду. Командир полка погиб. По остальным разбираюсь.
Сейчас как разберешься, всех соберешь, мне доложишь, как понял.
Оттуда били артиллерия, танки, с беспилотников, как я понял, байрактары летают. Остальным сейчас потерям разбираюсь.
Now, in watching this, General Petraeus said that what he saw suggested Russian forces could face serious difficulty actually taking the capital, Kyiv. And quoting him now, he said, "I'm starting to think they won't even be able to encircle Kyiv." More now on the battle and the day from CNN's Matthew Chance.
The aftermath of fierce fighting east of the Ukrainian capital. This is what you get when you invade Ukrainian land, the narrator says, as Russian forces attempt to encircle Kiev. The Ukrainian military says it's defeated an entire regiment of Russian tanks and liquidated its commander. Drone video captured the armoured column in the city of Brovary being attacked and destroyed. The latest battlefield win in what is proving for now to be a determined Ukrainian stand. But on the diplomatic front, stalemate. Despite the highest level talks since this Russia-Ukraine conflict began, foreign ministers meeting in the Turkish city of Antalya, Ukrainian officials tell CNN the Russian side appeared unwilling or unable to make a deal.
We also raised the issue of a ceasefire, 24-hour ceasefire, to resolve the most pressing humanitarian issues. We did not make progress on this since it seems that there are other decision makers for this matter in Russia.
It's these gut-wrenching scenes in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol provoking wide international scorn. A maternity hospital devastated by Russian forces, according to Ukrainian officials, killing at least 3 people inside, including a child. Horrific images are circulating, like this one, of pregnant women blooded in the attack. Still, the Russian foreign minister is insisting this was a legitimate strike on a far-right Ukrainian militia, the Azov Battalion, not a war crime.
At the meeting of the UN Security Council, our delegation presented facts about this maternity hospital having long been seized by the Azov Battalion and other radicals, and they have driven all the pregnant women and the nurses out of it.
But in cities across Ukraine, trapped civilians are desperately escaping the fighting. These the latest scenes from Irpin, north of Kiev, where the city's mayor says nearly half the population has already fled. With no peace in sight, Ukraine's capital is emptying as Russian forces advance.
That was Matthew Chance in Kyiv reporting for us. Joining us now from the Netherlands, CNN's Natasha Bertrand, who has new reporting tonight on the state of the battle as seen from the air Natasha, you flew in one of the NATO planes earlier that was conducting a surveillance mission. Where was that and what did you see?
That's right, Anderson. So we flew in a NATO aircraft that was conducting a surveillance mission over the Polish-Ukrainian border, kind of looking at what the Russian activity was in Ukrainian airspace. And what they saw is that there are a lot of Russian-made aircraft that have been taking off from Belarus and entering Ukrainian airspace in order to support those Russian military operations. The NATO airmen who were on board today told us that they have seen in the last week or so, last 2 weeks since this invasion began, that the vast majority of the Russian-made aircraft that is entering Ukrainian airspace to enter this fight is in fact coming from Belarus, really driving home just how important Belarus has been to Russia to help them sustain this conflict. Take a listen to what one NATO technician told me today.
We do see activity coming from Belarus going into the Ukraine, but we cannot distinguish whether it's a Russian aircraft or Belarusian aircraft. Right. So sometimes there are some certain periods on a day which are not on a regular basis, where we do have a lot of activity getting in, like a larger package with 10 to about 20 aircraft coming in from the Belarusian airspace into Ukraine.
So interestingly, Anderson, they cannot tell via their radar actually who is operating this Russian-made aircraft, right? The Russians and the Belarusians use the same types of fighter jets, and so it is unclear whether the Russians or the Belarusians have actually been entering Ukraine. But what is clear is that these missions have been flown into Ukraine in order to support the Russian military operations there, Anderson.
Well, all the intelligence that NATO is gathering, are they sharing it with Ukraine?
They're sharing it with NATO allies in real time, and those NATO allies then have at their discretion the intelligence that they can then provide to Ukraine directly. So NATO as a bloc obviously has been very reluctant to reveal that it is in any way providing weaponry or intelligence to Ukraine, because they do not want to be seen by Russia as having entered the conflict here. But what they told us today when we asked about this intelligence getting to Kyiv, they said that, look, all we can tell you is that this is going to our NATO allies, and then it is at their discretion what they want to do with that intelligence. Of course, the United States and the UK have been very forthright, saying that they have been providing such intelligence directly to Ukraine. Anderson.
Natasha Bertrand, I appreciate it. Thank you. Joining us now is Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group. His latest book, out May 17th, is titled The Power of Crisis, How Three Threats and Our Response Will Change the World. Mr. Bremmer, I know you think Vladimir Putin won't stop until he has taken control of Kyiv and President Zelensky is toppled. Given the resiliency the Ukrainians and Zelensky himself has shown, what do you see the next stages of this battle being?
Well, the next stages are that the Ukrainians are still going to occupy a lot of Ukraine, and they're going to have incredible support, economic, diplomatic, and military support from all of NATO. Which means that Putin's still going to have a significant fight on his hands. I mean, the big problem here, Anderson, is that even if Kyiv is taken and Zelensky is overthrown, the fact is that Putin will be in radically worse position politically inside his own country, economically in terms of how Russia's doing, and also geopolitically, especially in Europe, which was supposed to be why he invaded Ukraine to begin with. There's no circumstance under which Putin looks like a winner here, and therefore it's really hard to figure out any way for him to climb down or for negotiations to work.
If Vladimir Putin's forces do occupy Kyiv, occupy Kharkiv, there was that old saying in Iraq about U.S. forces: if you break it, I think it was Colin Powell's phrase, you break it, you bought it. It's going to be a huge drain on Russia to have suddenly now be an occupier in Ukraine, let alone a guerrilla struggle against the occupier, but just economically dealing with what do you do with Ukraine once you've taken charge of it?
I think it's pretty clear that Putin's original intention was that the Ukrainians were going to fall pretty quickly. He wasn't going to have to kill many civilians at all. He wasn't targeting them in the early days, let's be clear, and he'd be welcome as a liberator. We've heard that before, of course, and not just for the Russians. But that is not in any way the way this is going right now. And so you're, of course, very right that he can take Kiev, but it's not like he's won Ukraine, not at all. It's not like he's able to reestablish a Russian empire and become Putin the Great. That's not where this is heading. But it's also very hard to imagine that Putin's going to be forced out domestically, at least not anytime soon. Which means, you ask me how this looks when it's over, my response is, what do you mean over, Anderson? There's no time soon that you can imagine that either the sanctions are being removed, or Putin feels like he's in a stable situation, or that we can look forward to even a frozen conflict on the ground in Ukraine. The Ukrainians aren't going to suddenly say, okay, we're done, and we'll just sit in a rump of the west of the country while Putin and his forces occupy the rest of it. That's just not on. I mean, the very best scenario here looks to be a minimum of 5 million Ukrainian refugees and another 35 to 40 million that are occupied directly by a brutal Russian force. It's not stability going forward.
Especially 35 million people who hate the occupier and, I mean, with a burning passion, understandably, and seem more than capable of maintaining an ongoing guerrilla fight, whether it's in cities or in the countryside.
Seem more than willing. And of course, a big part of the problem is that information warfare, which is being won in extravagant fashion by Zelensky all over the world. And so there's going to be an enormous amount of willingness to continue to support the Ukrainians from the West, from NATO, from Europe, from the United States. And yet inside Russia, the average Russian believes that this is a war that is being fought unfairly by the Ukrainians. That indeed Russians have had genocide perpetrated by them. Again, fake news by the Ukrainians on the ground in the Donbass. That the reason the Russian economy is collapsing is because of NATO. It's really hard. We've seen a tiny bit of this in our own United States, Anderson. This is that times 100 for the Russians vis-a-vis Ukraine. And with that kind of completely different information circle by the Russians and by the rest of the world, how do you possibly bring these two sides together?
Yeah. Ian Bremmer, I appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Always good to see you.
Coming up next, report from Mariupol, a city under siege, running out of virtually everything, according to reports, that people need to survive. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark joins us. And later, a live report from Poland, where refugees just keep arriving, and as only CNN can, we're telling their stories ahead.
Fundamentally, the world is changing very rapidly because of technology, globalization, and people need to learn new skills. And if they do, there's a wide range of new opportunities for new jobs if people get skilled up. So we think this is going to persist far beyond the pandemic. There's a lot of interest for individuals coming directly to Coursera online to take professional certificates, to learn the skills, to get new digital careers. But the other thing that we're seeing is that businesses are realizing that embracing technology, going digital, moving to the cloud, using AI makes them more competitive. And so businesses are upskilling their employees using Coursera. And now, post-pandemic, universities and colleges all around the world, even as students come back to campus, they're realizing that integrating online learning into the way that students learn is a great way to provide flexibility and also access to emerging skills.
It really only takes a few moments to get an appreciation of just how tough it is out here. They've been coming across rifle fire, gunfire, mortar rounds. You can see really just how intense it is here. That's to wrap it up right now. Quite anxious about spending too much time on scene. Those are the kids really struggling to get away. They feel like they won't be able to outrun the war. They thought the border was over. And the clusters was what they think is going to be the better life. These nurses, these doctors really have nerves of steel. You can't help but be struck by how interconnected our world is. Arwa Damon, CNN.
Our
mission here at CNN and journalists. The news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster. You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts. It is critically important.
To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
Our engine continues, our impetus, our momentum.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
Normally this theatre would be filled with people and art and debate and energy. And so now we have to rely on the two of us.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. There seems to be some confusion that maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going? And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Alan Paul, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
Welcome back live from Ukraine tonight. Ukraine's president had this to say about the encircled and besieged city of Mariupol.
Там не було, ми будемо намагатись.
No matter what, we will try. Constantly, we will continue to try to bring to Mariupol the aid that people so desperately need, Ukrainians need.
Well, the need in Mariupol is beyond extreme. CNN's Phil Black has more.
When you hear a Ukrainian city is under siege, cut off and under bombardment by Russian forces, this is what that means. No one knows how many people have been killed in Mariupol, but it's too many to allow the care and dignity that usually comes with death. Relatively few images have escaped Mariupol since the siege began. These were captured by AP photojournalist Yevgeny Malaletko, who says he saw around 70 bodies buried in this trench over 2 days. They arrived wrapped in whatever people could find and use, plastic bags, even covered. This shows why it's likely there are many more. Mariupol suffering from above. Before and after satellite images reveal extraordinary devastation in commercial and shopping areas, residential neighborhoods too. Russian munitions are steadily wiping out this city. It's already unlivable. There is no food, water, or power.
Mariupol вперше.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a child in Mariupol has died of dehydration, probably for the first time since the Nazi invasion. During a meeting in Turkey, the Ukrainian foreign minister says he asked his Russian counterpart for a humanitarian corridor to allow people to leave Mariupol.
Unfortunately, Minister Lavrov was not in a position to commit himself to it, but he will correspond with respective authorities.
That means Sergei Lavrov has to ask his boss. But Russia's top diplomat was comfortable repeating Russia's explanation for bombing a maternity hospital in Mariupol on Wednesday. The Russian version says there were no patients or staff in these buildings, just soldiers. This was the reality, captured in the moments immediately after the blast. An obviously pregnant woman is stretchered from the side. Another, hurt, bleeding, walks out, carrying what she can. Russians often honor the bravery and determination shown by their own citizens who were besieged by Nazi forces in the Second World War. Now, Russia is inflicting that same suffering on the people of Mariupol. Phil Black, CNN, London.
Let's get some perspective on these Russian siege tactics. Joining us is retired Army 4-star General and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, General Wesley Clark. General Clark, thanks for being with us. You saw Phil Black's report, these just horrific attacks on Mariupol. I'm wondering what your reaction to this strategically. Is this simply to destroy any resistance in that vitally important town to the Russians so that they can move in without engaging in street-by-street combat?
That's exactly right, Anderson. That is part of what they're doing. They don't have the skills or the personnel to really do that urban fighting. But this is also a campaign of intimidation and terrorism. And what they want to do is use Mariupol as the example to the rest of Ukraine and to the world to show that Putin means what he says. He's going to take it no matter what the cost. He doesn't care about civilian casualties or the rules of warfare or any humanitarian issues. He wants what he wants. He doesn't care how many people are killed. He's going to take it. And that, coupled with the diplomatic discussions going on with Lavrov today, just another example of how the Russians operate. So the diplomatic discussions, they raise hopes in the West. They forestall decisive action by NATO member states and other states. They slow things down at the UN. They give the Russians more time to put the squeeze on, and they also put the pressure on Zelensky to explain, well, why is he allowing this to continue? This is all part of an integrated Russian strategy run by Vladimir Putin. This shows this is the foretaste of what could happen to Kyiv if we don't provide the support that's